We talk about it as a community where we want everybody to feel loved, served, inspired, and connected. That's kind of the purpose. Could the built environment, together with great programming and activities in it, cause people to live longer, better, happier lives? The results are so positive, financially and otherwise, and certainly on the human scale.
Today, I got to speak with Rob Parker, who is the president of Trilith, a really well-known walkable community outside of Atlanta, Georgia. It's actually next to Trilith Studios, where they film The Avengers and some of those other Marvel movies. Rob is the president of Trilith and a really remarkable guy, lots of experience in business and philanthropy. And I'm excited to share just such a practical conversation of someone who's actually done this, who's helped build a town from scratch. And I look forward to sharing this all with you. I'll read his bio really quickly. Rob Parker is a transformational organizational leader with 35 years of experience on a local, national, and international level. He has a strong track record of success in multiple disciplines, including innovative town building, commercial and retail development, music entertainment, nonprofit leadership, marketing and branding, and capital development. As president of Town at Trilith, Rob leads a team of designers, architects, planners, and builders, creating a 235-acre master-planned residential and mixed-use development located in South Metro Atlanta, adjacent to Trilith Studios. Rob previously served as CEO of Southern Ground, leading both the business and philanthropic efforts of the three-time Grammy-winning multi-platinum artist Zac Brown and Zac Brown Band, as well as Kiwanis International Boys and Girls Club and Ronald McDonald House Charities. My name's Austin, and this is the Building Culture Podcast. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors of the podcast, Sierra Pacific Windows, who, when they reached out to me recently, I was glad to say yes, because we at Building Culture use their windows on about 90% of our projects. The whole team loves them, and really thankful to have them sponsoring the podcast. I also want to thank One Source Windows, who, if you are in the state of Oklahoma, it doesn't just matter about the window manufacturer, but also about the distributor and the installer and the people you're working with. And we've used One Source Windows, who sells Sierra Pacific and several other great lines, for also about 90% of our projects. All right, on to the podcast. Well, Rob, it is really good to have you on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, Austin. Thrilled to be here.
I'm glad we made it work out, even though we had some technical difficulties. Before we get into it, and even some of the deeper things and the why behind what you're doing and all that, I would love for you to tell the audience or anyone listening, what is Trilith, and you can even be specific, like what actually is it?
So we're building a remarkable town for creatives, artists, storytellers, and makers. We talk about it as a community where we want everybody to feel loved, served, inspired, and connected. That's kind of the purpose of what we set out to do. We are connected to the largest studio operation, film and television studio operation in North America, Trilith Studios, and we're directly adjacent and have shared ownership interests. And really, it's a company town, originally designed as a company town for the film industry. If you can imagine Hollywood having been master planned, which it wasn't. It really was the Wild West when that happened. And because of that, it's a very scattered kind of Burbank and Hollywood and et cetera. So this is a master plan community for that. I think it started out as a company town idea and grew into so much more when we discovered new urbanism, when we discovered this idea that we believe there's a better way to live in a community. Quite frankly, the way we used to live before the automobile came into our lives. And it's kind of a look back to a different time when neighborhoods were walkable and had stores and you knew everybody there. So it's been a really interesting experiment. If I actually experiment is not the right word, because we're actually an authentic town with about 1,200 people living here right now, expected to grow to about 5,000. The big why is that we believe that that people live better lives, they'll tell better stories, and firmly believe that we can influence culture in a positive way if we can influence the culture makers that make film and television. So that's what we set out to do.
It's really, really cool. You started jumping into the why there, and I'm really curious to dive into more of that because, you have an interesting background in business and philanthropy and entertainment, and working with Zach Brown Band and all that. So I'm curious to hear. Clearly, you're pretty mission-minded, right? It's not just, hey, looking at where the dollar signs are, where can I make the most money? It's you're clearly trying to accomplish something. So how did building a town play into that?
Yeah, so did start out in the nonprofit space, 20 years with Boys and Girls Clubs early on, and then Kiwanis International and Ronald McDonald House Charities. Through that process, found out that, from a very mission driven standpoint, that if people can do great in business by setting out to do good. And I ended up working with Zach Brown on originally his idea of a camp for kids with autism, ADD, ADHD. He had set that goal before he made it big, and he'd been funding it out of every dollar, about a portion of every dollar that he made. So he set out from the beginning to do good. So I helped him for about 3 years, supported the work that he was doing from a philanthropic standpoint, but fell forward. He and I connected really well. He had some need for somebody to help lead the business side. So I fell into music entertainment, into taking our teams on the road, about 100 people every week on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, touring, and then our studio work, and then a number of different businesses that Zach had that all were pointed towards his philanthropy. And so restaurants and metalworks and leather and furniture and amazing 14 different companies, all built around Zach Brown and the Southern Ground. So it really kind of inspired me to in the for-profit space to again if you set out to do good, if you've got a legacy interest, if you've got something that you want to do that's more than profits. By the way, I should stop and say, without profits, there is no ability to do this. Without profit, there's no margin. You can't do mission. So you got to make money to be able to do it. And so along the way, connected with film and television, and our chief visionary for Trilith, and the rest is history. Had a deep dive into the town building placemaking space.
How many years ago was that when Trilith really got off the ground, and were you part of it from the very beginning? You mentioned a visionary behind it.
Yeah, so Trilith Studios began. Dan Cathy from Chick-fil-A was the primary driver and an investor to bring what was then Pinewood Studios out of London and to create Pinewood Atlanta Studios. And that was in 2012, 2013. So we were just celebrating our 10-year anniversary. And then 3 years later, the town began. And that's when I joined in 2016. And it was a wheat field when we started. And it's a town right now. So I would say, again, based on new urbanist principles of walkability, sustainability, deep sense of community, and again, a look back to the way we used to live.
When were you introduced to that concept, and how does it contrast to how you grew up? For example, how you grew up and also how you lived, throughout your most of your life. What kind of neighborhood were you living in, and then what caught you about the ideas?
I love that you've asked that question because I've been doing this for 8 years, and I don't think anybody's ever asked me that to go all the way back. But I grew up with 5 brothers and sisters, so there was 8 of us at home all the time. It was a traditional neighborhood. We rode our bikes. We came, you hear the old stories. This is the 60s and 70s, so we came home after dark. Headed out on our bicycles in the morning, came home when the street lights came on, kind of existence. So I grew up with that. For years, was not connected to that, didn't have that experience. Traditional suburban neighborhoods, which we were always directed to. I wasn't a city guy. So if you're not in the city in the US, you're either way out in the country, rural, or you're in this in-between interstitial area that quite frankly doesn't work. And I'd love to dive a little deeper into that from a culture standpoint if you want to. But I lived in the suburbs and having never experienced walkability, a sense of community, the connectivity. So this really was my introduction. We got a chance to go to Seaside, Rosemary Beach, Alice Beach, and kind of see what it looked like from a destination standpoint. And then visited some other towns that were walkable. And then historically went back to older neighborhoods to kind of create, I guess the challenge, Austin, that I didn't tell you, the challenge we were given was if you could build a town, any town from scratch, how would you build it? And so we jumped on the road and went and looked at how are people living really, really well. Looked at blue zones. How do people live long lives? What causes people to thrive and flourish? Could the built environment, together with great programming and activities in it, cause people to live longer, better, happier lives? And all of that kind of research and reading. And once we were into it, we were deep. And the result, I think, is something pretty special.
Yeah, it's like taking the red pill. I remember I grew up in the suburbs of Houston, and it was very similar to, that middle area you're talking about, where
Yes.
there's just, unless my parents could drive me somewhere, there was just nothing I could do,
Right.
Although I grew up before the suburbs were completely surrounded. It's kind of like the ideal suburb still, where it was a neighborhood kind of far out from Houston, and I'd ride my bike for 10 miles. But by the time I left high school, there was nothing left. There was no land left. There was no bayou left. There was just, endless sprawl. And you touched on culture again, and even that kind of void of culture and what I would just kind of describe as sprawl. Can you talk about that? Like, what do you mean by it's really hard to have culture when we build in that way versus in this different way that we are talking about, kind of the old way, you could say?
Well, let me just do a quick dive into the suburbs. For anybody who's read Suburban Nation, and if you haven't, I'd encourage you. It talks a lot about this idea that we created this place that uses a significant amount of resources, that each one of us lives on an acre or an acre and a half or 5 acres, et cetera. Our roads and our infrastructure are all used to support us in a way that has us very spread out. We also built in the suburbs with zoning that separated all of our uses. And so you work in one place, you live in another, you go to the grocery store in one spot, you go to the gym. I think the average person in the suburbs drives about 70 trips a week where they go to different places. Somebody in a walkable village or town where you walk to the majority of your uses and they're all connected, will do about 7 trips a week. So those numbers are stunning when you think about how the car has become, like, we all know we spend way too much time in our cars, but there's a disconnectedness then from during our lives, during our day with the people around us. I could probably hit you a few that were my favorites too. I think the garage door opener is a disaster because it allowed us to not even have to interact with our neighbors, pull in our driveway. Air conditioning, quite frankly, sent us all inside. And we used to sit on the front porch and we used to interact. We used to have the windows open and interact more with each other. And of course, when you walk to the corner store, when you walk to the and shopped in your own neighborhood, you were much more connected.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be. It's pretty devastating, like you said, on resources, on people. And there's this ideal of the suburb or idea of the suburb that's not actually real. Maybe there are a few out there that do still function pretty well. But one of my friends likes to say, with sprawl, the more you add to it, the worse it gets.
Well, for sure. Well, when you're driving to your job and then you're going back home to a different environment, you rarely get involved in the community. You're especially if you have a significant commute, you're not going to be involved in your church and your community activities and all those kind of things if you're not part of that community. You asked about culture, though. So what it does is you just don't have the ability to create the kind of culture that we're experiencing at Trilith, where just on Sunday we had a block party and we had 300 residents out in the street with music and engaging with each other. And I would say that's the organized kind of activities that are happening regularly. But the really cool thing is the bicycles that are laying in front lawns and in the park, and toys all over, and what we call free range kids. Our kids are just out there, and there's probably an illusion of safety, but there's a lot of security that happens when you live close together, when you know your neighbors, when everybody's an aunt and uncle watching out for you. I remember I had a chance to work with Colin Powell when I was at Boys and Girls Clubs of America. He was on our board, and he wrote a book about his life, and he talked about the Auntie Net, which was before the internet. There was the Auntie Net, and those were the all his aunts in the neighborhood. And he said, if you mess up, he said, the Auntie Net was faster than the internet, because before you got home, mom knew what you did up to. So it's that kind of, I know we can't look back and say the 50s and 60s were not fabulous for everybody, right? So there's a lot of challenge when you think that way, if you dive deep. But there was some really, really good about how we lived connected lives.
Gosh, I got to experience a similar thing. I lived for 4 years in Carlton Landing, when I was building, and I didn't have kids at the time. I've got a 4-year-old and a 6-week-old now. But I experienced the same thing with just free range kids. We called them the same thing. They're just out in packs everywhere. And it was so, it's like we were, once again, married, don't have kids, but it was still, I don't know, it was cool to see. And inspiring. And you're so right. If they got in trouble, boy.
Yeah.
that circle got around real quick back. Okay, who was where and what?
Sadly, it's almost nostalgic, right?
Yeah.
We're looking back at something that used to be. We're experiencing it here, and it can be created. The built environment really makes that happen. How narrow the streets are, how close the houses are together, how close to the street the porches are. You can have private courtyards between homes, but you can have homes that are 10 or 12 feet apart, but are up on the street and connected in a way that really connects you. We walk to the mailbox to get our mail. We joke about it's a 5-minute walk to the mailbox and a 45-minute journey, because along the way you talk to everybody that you see. We say, if you're going to work out, you better put on headphones and not make eye contact, because it's that kind of engagement, and the built environment can help support that.
I love that, because in the sprawl situation, which the vast majority of Americans are kind of stuck in, they don't even have an option outside of it, but it's all about the destination. It's, I'm going to do this. And then you get in your car and you go do that. You consume that thing, you go to the gym or whatever, and you miss out on all the life that happens in between those, single specific moments. And I think that's where so much of the richness is that we have lost in American culture.
There's no doubt about that. You're already there when you're living in a walkable environment.
Yeah. It's interesting because during COVID, and this might sound like an interesting place that I'm going here, but during COVID, you had a lot of pushback all of a sudden against this idea of 15-minute cities, where people started thinking, and I understand why, because you had a lot of stuff going on during COVID, and people, tyrannical governments trying to control people and all that. But somehow 15-minute cities, this idea that actually means something to me of very much like what you're talking about, freedom and choice and community, gets attached to this idea of control and not having freedom. And it's, you're trying to take away my car. And I've even written some posts recently where people, talking about, I'm not calling it 15-minute cities even, but just talking about building in a more walkable way. And it's suddenly about, so that you can control everyone, so that you can take away people's cars, so that you can, whatever. Do you experience that? Do you hear that? And also, how do you respond to that? How do you think about that? And why do you think it's clearly not that? And in some ways, I'm asking, what's the kind of conservative values that actually support this kind of way of building and living?
Yeah, so I got to tell you, I have not heard it in the way that you just described. In fact, I would tell you that the pandemic doubled and tripled the size of our town because people were searching for a safe place. We talked about, if you remember COVID, well, and you think about the progression, we started out by going home, right? And being by ourselves. And it was just us and our family. That was the tight circle that we lived in. And it's the only safe ones, right? And then you ventured out and you got a little bigger circle. And it was the 2 or 3 friends that you trusted and that you might be connected, might be willing to go to their house. And our circles got, maybe a little bit bigger over time, but it took quite a while. And people didn't want to get in elevators. They didn't want to touch things that other people had touched. They didn't want to connect at that level. And we saw what happened in New York and some of the big cities. Atlanta was no different. People came fleeing, quite frankly, towards something that felt more, felt safer, more connected, and a size that made sense. Again, I don't know that it was any safer to live in our town, but I tell you, people were there. We were there for long periods of time. There were a little bit of, we had a little bit where you just wish people would go somewhere because we were all on top of each other. But it was remarkable in being part of a community that's like that. I would say it's the freedom question, because I've not heard that before. I would say it couldn't be more different. The idea that you are free from your car. By the way, you can go get in your car and go anywhere you want to. Not everything happens in our town. We still go to the city to watch the Braves play, and we still go to a show at the Fox Theater. We go out to a nice restaurant. But Saturday night, we didn't have to, because we could walk to the steakhouse, we could walk to sushi, we could walk to the Mexican restaurant right in town and walk home. And it's a real freedom when you're not tied to your car. During that same time period, co-working and working at home, working distance, virtually, it allowed people to stay. We had people who didn't get in their cars for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And it was a freedom from that, not I don't want you to, or I want to control your life. So I found it very, very different. And I will hit the second part. You talked about probably that conservative set of values that, quite frankly, have influenced our founder in particular, who's a person of faith, and for whom that faith and his family values were a big part of his vision for what we were doing, creating an environment where people could live together and closely and love each other. We use words like love and serve and connected, because that's the kind of environment that those are the things that we value. We want to be a caring community. We really want to know what's going on in people's lives. So I just reject this theory that, that we can't love each other, care for each other. I'll tell you one other quick thing. I was, as we became very politically kind of divided as a nation and have continued, I remember that old expression that, all politics are local. Ultimately, all politics are local. So you got to get involved locally if you're going to change politics. Well, love is local too. So this idea that if we're going to change things, I can't change things in Washington. I can change things in my neighborhood and in the people that I hang out with. So we've kind of identified this 1,000 acres as our place to love and serve people. That's a long answer to your question, but it goes at the heart of our why.
I'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsors of our podcast. First, Sierra Pacific Windows. We use their windows on the majority of our builds at Building Culture, and one of our go-to products is their H3 casement window. We love casements because they open sideways, they open all the way, they kind of have this classic window feel, and I really like that you don't have that horizontal bar when looking from the exterior. And to get really nerdy on you, we really love their 5/8 putty profile on the window, which kind of feels updated, but still a very classic detail. Also, Sierra Pacific Windows. If you are in the state of Oklahoma, Sierra Pacific has a showroom in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, and we actually purchase our Sierra Pacific windows through them. Because it doesn't just matter the window manufacturer, it matters who you're buying your window from, who's putting that order together, who's installing it, who's warranting it. And we work with both of these people at Building Culture, and I was very happy to say yes when they asked to sponsor the podcast. All right, back to the show. No, it's great. And yeah, I'm not even trying to say, it is a conservative value. It's more that it's kind of an apolitical thing is what I mean.
100%.
Where it's about people across the political aisle, whatever, it doesn't matter, want these same things. They want their kids to be able to run around freely. They want to be able to live in community. And I think many people, at least not everyone, wants to be able to live without their car all the time. Like you're saying, you can still get in the car and go somewhere. And that will probably always be a part of things because a car is a really great tool. But a tool is something you choose to use.
That's right.
If you're forced to use it to do anything at all, that's more like a form of slavery than it is a tool to assist you live a better life.
Let me circle back and make a clarifying comment here. I said conservative values in the same sentence, and let me clarify what I mean by that. This is a community that welcomes everybody, no matter where they are on any spectrum. And diversity, inclusion, and anything you want to talk about in that way. And it is remarkably diverse in all those ways. There's no gates on the community, and everybody is welcome. And we're a part of the film industry, which has a very culture, from California, from the coast, from New York, from London, from Austin. We've got all different kinds of people on the political spectrum. I will say in the 8 years I've been here, politics hasn't been a part of the conversation. It's about a community. It's about people. It's a people-centered world that we're kind of creating together. And while it always, I'm sure, seeps into conversations at some point, it's not been at the core of our conversation.
Yeah, it's so great. That was one of the things that I experienced living in Carlton Landing, which is a similar, town, you could say, with the same
Yes.
Principles and stuff, is that I used to have this idea that community was, I don't know, having a bunch of best friends, having a big dinner and a planned dinner in the park every week or something like that. And it's like
Yes.
that can be part of it, but that's really not what community is. It's actually all these loose connections and loose touches where, like you're saying, you go to the mailbox and you get to chat for who knows how many people, and it doesn't matter. You can have opposite beliefs about things, but because like when you're inviting someone into your home, that's a pretty personal thing, and you might want to share a lot of values, whatever those values are. But when you actually live in a real, what I would say, community where neighborly interactions are easy, there's low friction. It's amazing how many people that you can loosely be connected to in a really enriching way. Or at least it really enriched me. I feel like I knew more people while living in Carlton Landing than like any other time, except like since college.
It's interesting that you said that, and you mentioned college. So college, the university setting is one where we learn about walkability and what a community is like when everything is within walking distance, unless you're at a huge university. But generally, the student center, the quad, the main area where everybody hangs out, wherever you get your mail, wherever you go and eat, that's a walkable town. And then we leave that, and unless we go to a walkable city or a walkable town, we don't experience it again. And so it's very much that same connectivity. And you remember college, it was very casual connections, and you never know. In fact, that's how we end up oftentimes meeting a mate there, is because there are these collisions that happen all the time, these positive collisions. And that happens in community that way.
It does. And to continue a little bit more on the culture aspect, you said specifically, a lifestyle for creatives, and also talked about it's not just, you got to get the hardware right, the place, the building right, but then you also talk about the programming. And I kind of think of that as like the keeper of the vision a little bit,
Yes.
where you kind of do need, I think, I don't know, I'm also asking, this is my experience, like you really do need a keeper of the vision. I remember when Grant, the founder of Carlton Landing, he moved his family out there and lived out there and really was central to that beginning to flourish. And he was able to move out later, but that was really critical, I think. How have you thought about culture from a programming perspective? And how long have you lived out there? I'm assuming it's you and your wife and kids. Have they moved out? How do you think about that?
Sure.
Trilith.
So the original vision casting was from Dan, our chief visionary. And then my job was to execute on that vision. And it was a small team when we started out. And as our team, I would say that you got to have to cast a vision, and we cast a vision. In my case, I also have a coaching background. And so coaches have to kind of cast the vision on a regular basis, and leaders do. Vision leaks, right? So every Monday morning, I've got our teams together, and we're going back to the why and why we're doing this and the higher purpose, and then we're executing on those things. This is a area. Our chief visionary does not live in the town, but lives in that area, just a few miles away. We moved in early on with my family and my 92-year-old mom, who was struggling at the time, early stages of dementia. And I have to tell you, it couldn't have been a more beautiful place for her to be. She would, in her most lucid moments, describe this as the best time of her life, even with Dad gone and her having that sadness, because she was loved and cared for, and she could walk safely, and she would go to the mailbox. Sadly, she'd go to the mailbox 8 or 10 times a day and not remember that she'd already been, but it didn't matter. She was greeted warmly and cared for, and we called her the honorary mayor. To your question about vision, though, so the vision keepers, then there had to be more. There had to be not just the original vision and me executing it, but we need to cast the vision, and then we need vision keepers. And so I would say there are probably both employees, contractors, and residents who serve in a variety of roles, volunteer or staff, that have caught the vision, who know what we're trying to do, and help us recast it all the time. One of the concerns that town builders who have started something that is special with a mission and purpose should be concerned about, and it's a real concern, is that what happens when you turn that town over to an HOA, as an example, for a group of people how do you get the ideals of the founder to stick? And it's a challenge. There are many tell you that traditional neighborhoods, where the developer turns it over to the HOA, within 5 years, all semblance of what originally was anticipated is been replaced with individuals fighting with each other for, power over the neighborhood, or, their individual rights. And it goes from a large ideal to something much different towards individual needs. So, and I can answer some of those questions about what we're doing, but the reality is you got to share the vision. It can't just be one person's vision, and you've got to have you got to cast it, and then you got to have other people that carry it in their heart to keep it forward.
Yeah, and what are some of those examples? Even specifically, if you can, of what you are doing, you and your team are doing, what you're doing, what the community is doing.
Yeah, we were very fortunate that because we also created the town center with restaurants, retail, and commercial, we chose to own those spaces so that we could control and quite influence and control what happens in those. And so who our retailers are, who our restaurateurs are, primarily owners. We wanted people that were in their stores, in their restaurants, so Main Street operators, not chains. We didn't want, just a manager, assistant manager from a corporate headquarters in a store or a restaurant. So part of it was who is there. By owning it, and we also, we're collecting rent and we're paying bills, and we have a team of people that run the town center who, quite frankly, are now on the payroll and can be carriers of the vision. So we literally have a staff of people, and so the community now is, at least the town center, is self-supporting. The HOA, we have maintained ownership and control of, and we don't have to turn it over to the residents until we sell the last lot by law here in Georgia. And so we're hanging on to that lot for a while, but not for anything other than we really want this thing to stick. And then we have volunteer positions, and that may be a little bit even better. We have a residents advisory committee. We have a group that established themselves that call themselves Belong and Belong at Trilith, and they put on some of the events and activities. I just think if you don't share it, if you don't allow other people to join in, if it doesn't become their shared vision, then it won't last.
Yeah, and I would assume, in part of the being good at communicating the vision, in some ways, people are a bit self-selecting when they move there, right? Because they're looking for what you're talking about.
But we do say It's not for everybody. If you don't want, if you don't want somebody playing Frisbee on the grass right outside your window, which is a shared common space because our public spaces are all pretty shared and our individual lots are small, then this is probably isn't the community for you. If you want to be able to go about your day and not have to talk to people and not engage, this is probably not for you. If you do want that, yeah, this is it. I would say one other thing: when people arrive, they usually have one of three reactions. Either this is the place they've been looking for their whole life, and they just couldn't be happier, and they engage right away. There's some that get here and say, there is no way that I would live that close to my neighbor. This is not for me. And then there's this group in the middle that isn't sure, that has lived apart, has lived separated, have lived on an acre or 2 acres or 5 acres, and aren't really sure what it's going to be like to be this close to other people. And it's those folks that we see come back on the weekends. They're walking on Saturday and Sunday. They're checking it out. One spouse or the other likes the idea. One isn't sure. And it's a long sales process for us with those people. But ultimately, when they do come in, it's because they've been convinced that there's a better way to live. I share one other thing. When my mom was there with us, we were there about a year. Ultimately, it was very hard to develop a community that you're living in. And I was too accessible and too close to, everybody knew my name and thought I sold their house to them, thought I built their house. And if their roof was leaking, it was it was my issue. So we lived there for about a year. In that time, Austin, we had more friends. We were in more people's homes than they were in our homes than any time in our life. We counted about 40 people that were couples that had been in our house or we'd been in theirs. We knew their kids' names. And I couldn't count on one hand those neighbors in the suburban neighborhoods that I had lived in for 30 years prior. I couldn't name more than a half a dozen people. So it is a very different way to live.
Yeah, I don't think you're the only one town founder who moved into their own community and had the exact same experience.
I love them. I got to tell you, I got to circle back and say, it wasn't really them, it was me. Yeah. I could not sign off. I could not just say, wait, call me back on Monday. Yeah. I wanted to solve their problems. And so I was diving pretty deep into it. Nobody came and knocked on our door. Yeah. It wasn't that. It was me never being off the clock, I think.
Shifting gears just a little bit on, you mentioned at the beginning, sustainability and health. It's on your website and stuff. And obviously sustainability is a very popular term now. It almost means nothing from just a word because everyone's talking about sustainability. And, when you're building sprawl, all that sustainability is forced into this one little metric, R value, energy efficiency. And right. In my personal opinion, when you're building in such a resource intensive way, like endless sprawl is, it doesn't really matter how energy efficient your house is. It's not a sustainable practice. How do you think about sustainability and also human health as well? Because you don't have, you don't have very many builders and stuff talking about human health.
Yes, I would say for us, we were pretty committed to this thriving and flourishing idea. And one of the other ways that vision actually stays in place and helps us think about this is we formed the Trilith Foundation. And so we've got a group of people whose sole job it is to help us figure out how to help people live healthier lives. It's all built on a foundation of health and wellness because you cannot thrive or flourish unless you're physically in good condition. And so one of the very first buildings we built was a fitness and wellness center in conjunction with the local hospital. And this is a world-class 60,000 square foot, a serious commitment to that. And then the green space, we set aside 50% of our land for green space, about 15 miles of paths that wind through not just the woods, but also through the neighborhoods, these pedestrian corridors. 19 parks, people are either face a park or within a block of a park. So all of that commitment to green has been great. We've got about 50 acres that are wetlands connected to us for what we would call the term I'd never heard, forest bathing. This idea that you literally could go out and just be in the woods and be grounded. The but then it carried over into our practices. And Austin, we're one of our largest all geothermal communities. So we use the earth to heat and cool our homes. Remarkably efficient, but also very quiet. They don't make any noise. There's no outdoor units. So geothermal. We went ahead and built our homes with the idea that we wanted them to be better in 100 years, that 100 years from now, those homes would still be standing, which meant the materials that we made them out of were different. We spray foamed the ceilings, the walls, everything. We did that R value that you talk about, but we did use a third-party testing company to come in and test every single home before it's sold. And so there's a remarkable commitment to that. Solar, smart home technologies. When you combine all of that, and by the way, build smaller footprint homes so they heat and cool easier, and also supports our other idea, which is that less is more, and we should be more focused on experiences and relationships than in accumulating things. And so we build smaller footprint, very efficient homes. And all of those, to me, play really well together towards sustainability. The last part then is the activity, the enrichment activities that happen that are more than just social, that literally get at emotional and mental health, as you know, is a major concern. And in our industry, the film industry in particular, where people are away from their families for long periods of time on location shooting, it can be really traumatic. So I don't know if that's fully answers your question, but we're committed to it from the ground up. And we're seeing the benefit of it.
Oh, that's great. I personally love geothermal as well. We've done that on all our homes, and the quiet thing is just as great as the energy efficiency of it.
It really is. We say if you without all those units outside, you can hear your neighbors arguing. I mean, you can hear the kids playing.
Right.
Good stuff.
Yeah. The other thing I like about even smaller footprints too is bigger is just not always better. Not just not accumulating things, but you can actually have a more curated, higher quality, not just higher quality, but more curated space in a sense. It's like, rather than a wall of paintings from Target, you have a couple really nice paintings, that you bought from, I don't know, when you were traveling here, and it has a story that goes along with it. You can't it's really difficult to fill a 5,000 square foot house with meaningful things because you don't interact with them enough.
You are correct. We did do tiny homes with micro homes, and we've got 100 of those that we're building that are 500 square feet, and we have one as small as 375. We do tree houses, what we call canopy homes. So we've got some different style as well. And the smaller footprint really does create for a different kind of living.
Actually, that's a good question. What's kind of the biggest and smallest kind of range of houses you guys have?
Yeah, 375 feet. And then we have one little section that is our enclave that is got its first 10,000 square foot home. But the majority of our homes are in the 1,800 to 3,000 square foot range. 3,000 is a big house in our community.
Now, you guys have a school, right?
We have an amazing school.
How did that come to be? And was that a really critical element, you think, to Trilith success? Can you talk about the school?
Sure. So we were very fortunate that we've got great public schools here in our area. And so that it's always a critical factor when you're developing to make sure that you've got a strong education system. But for us, we also knew that there were going to be parents who were going to want a different type of education, smaller, more focused, and quite frankly, that maybe mirrored what we were doing in the community, and that they could walk to school. So you created that walkability, that one less trip. So we were challenged to, again, without a school, to say, if you were going to do a school, what would you do? We were very blessed to have one of our residents who had 4 young kids, who, as his professional responsibility, was a Harvard-trained progressive school consultant. So he was literally, with his doctorate in education, was teaching others about self-directed learning and progressive models. And we said to Dr. Thigpen, if you could have any school for your kids, what would you want? And he knew immediately what it was. And it's called an Acton Academy, Acton, out of Austin. And I jumped on a plane and went to Austin and met Jeff, the founder. And it was exactly as Tyler described. And we brought it back. We started, and Tyler became the headmaster, and his 4 kids were our first 4 kids to sign up. We signed up, I think, 12 or 15 kids that first year. We have 150 students now. And it is a remarkable self-directed learning. We don't have teachers. We have guides. We don't have students. They are heroes on a hero journey. And they learn that they're on a journey. And they learn how to learn more than they learn things. And they spend most of their time on what we call quests, which is literally that practical application of the knowledge that the things that they're learning. And ultimately that lead to more traditional internships. But it is, I've heard it described as kind of Montessori for K to 12. And I have grandchildren that have been through the program. And yeah, they definitely learn how to learn and are lifetime learners. I'd say one other thing, teachers, which are guides, are not allowed to answer questions. Adults are not allowed to answer questions. You can only ask other questions that would point someone in a direction. So if a student asks a question, you have to give them a question back. Where do you think you might find that answer, or who in your life might be able to point you towards that answer?
Fascinating. We could have a whole podcast just on that, because I have a lot of questions. I'm not going to ask them, but I'm going to look it up. Acton
all
Academy.
All you asked me was, do we have a school? And you can see how fast.
Wow, that is cool.
Yes, we do.
That is really interesting. You said it's K through 12 too, you said.
Yes, it is. I think the challenge, though, is that by the time they're about 15 years old, they have tested and covered all of what you would in a typical public school setting. And so we have to find things for them to do because they're 15 years old. And so it's a deeper experience. We could graduate them, a bunch of 15-year-olds, but so we're having a hard time, quite frankly, keep building the high school because they go on so fast. But no, it's remarkable.
Wow, that's really interesting. Cool. If you've been enjoying the Building Culture podcast and are listening on Apple or Spotify, could you pause for just a moment and leave a 5-star review? My goal is to get to 100 reviews. And if you do, take a screenshot and email it to playbook@buildingculture.com. Playbook, PLAYBOOK @buildingculture.com. And when we hit 100, I'll randomly pick 5 winners and send them a Building Culture hat that looks just like this. I appreciate it. And back to the show. Well, okay. I've got a next question.
Sure.
And this one might be, answer whatever you can, and not whenever anyone thinks about development and starting a town, finance and how you finance it becomes a really, 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 really big deal. You said you built the town center and you held on to that and you were able to start programs like a school and things like that. How did you finance it? I know you had a kind of a primary backer. Was this a raise where you went out and raised a bunch of money, or is it a group of passionate investors that? Yeah, I'll just kind of leave it open ended there.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the core issue, right? And I would say this is a legacy play. So to be fair, I would say it happened faster than most. I believe this town could have happened at a slower pace with the same approach in a more traditional development way. But for us, we did have the advantage of someone who was able to put his own capital at risk to get it started, and was patient. It's patient capital. And I just helped host a group of town builders here, and a lot of questions were around that. If you've got to go to very, very traditional institutional funding sources who have IRR requirements and who want to return and an exit that has to happen in 5 years or 7 years, and you've got to get your money back and have a certain return, this isn't what you want to do. This isn't the place for that. With that said, by having some patient capital and by only doing those things that we felt we needed to do, putting in the infrastructure, managing it, and quite frankly, shaping the design and the amenities, and then bringing on partners to do, as an example, the hotel, our multifamily, our office building, our fitness and wellness center. So appropriately, leveraging other people's money and giving them an opportunity to do well themselves. And quite frankly, not having our primary funder, a primary investor who had to have a return by a certain date. This is a generational play. All those things play together. The interesting thing about it was that while the intent was never to make money and make a bunch of money and have a big return, just by doing the right things right, our homes are selling at 3 times the local market. Our commercial is renting at 30% higher than everything around us. All of our homes were either pre-sold. I have very few specs, either pre-sold or just right away. Our apartments are full, et cetera. So I would say there is a formula here for, again, with the right patient capital, being able to make the right investments up front that make people fall in love with the place. And probably the only heartbreak for us is that it's not very attainable these days. It started out much more attainable than it is now. When people fall in love and supply is low, and then the pandemic happened and prices went up 30-40%. It's hard to make it attainable. But from a financing standpoint, we're limited, I would say, by the same things that everybody else is right now. Our next phase of multifamily, there's no institutional funding. Nobody's interested in doing that. Our office building, our second office building is, that pad is sitting, waiting for it. Now, when I did say we still use traditional funding for institutional funding, what we had the advantage of was to having patient equity, and so to be able to come with our 15 or 20% that we needed to, and then leverage the other.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about even construction of single family houses? Did you partner with a builder? Do you have a builders guild, or are you riding on the developer guaranteeing construction loans, or is that kind of all separate third party?
Yeah, we create and sell lots to builders. Builders build homes. We help sell those through a sales center and a relationship with a broker and with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, developer services. But we don't build homes. We miss out on that part of the profit chain, but we also don't have to build homes. And so we have a builders guild, 6 builders who do a really nice job for us and build great houses. That's the other thing. When I was living there and they thought I built their house, I'm like, well, I really didn't. But we do have really, really tight controls on architecture and design. And our builders have seen the return on investment. So they're very, very willing to allow us to have that level of control. We have a primary town urbanist, a gentleman named Lou Oliver, who's just a remarkable designer and town urbanist. And we've got 320 homes that we've built. And we've probably, other than a few custom homes where we've allowed other architects to come in, we've maintained the architecture on probably 300 of them. So
amazing. If you were to do this Trilith 2.0, is there anything you would do differently? A nice way of saying, what are some of the biggest mistakes you've made? Or just things you've learned, you go, man, I would approach that differently. I would do that differently, that you're able to talk about.
Yeah, it's interesting because we just went through this exercise as we did an open town hall at the National Town Builders Association when we hosted them here. And you've got town builders who are walking your town looking at everything, where each transformer was placed and, et cetera. And so we did this session called Wish I'd have thought of that. Well, so they can give us their feedback. And remarkably, there were not, and I feel like really protected and blessed in this, that there were not major mistakes. The our apartments were, because of the space that we had and the number that we were trying to do, and we wanted to hide our cars in the middle. So we used liner buildings, but we didn't double load the corridors because we just didn't have enough room. And it's a very inefficient, way to do it when you have interior corridor and you've only got to do the exterior of, 2 apartments instead of 1. So I would double load the corridors and on the multifamily. We would have, it's so interesting to think about. You need the town center to sell houses, but you need houses and people to warrant having a town center. And so it was an interesting dynamic where the houses came first, about 100 or so of them, and then the town followed behind it. The multifamily over ground floor retail has worked out fabulously. I would caution people, never put owners over ground floor retail. So we have 3 stories above ground floor retail, but you don't want to sell condo product. And we did not do that by learning from others. Because if you're an owner, if you're a renter, you move if you don't like the smell coming up from the restaurant below you or the noise. If you're an owner, you fight. And so so that was one that we avoided making that mistake. And then we wrestled a lot with how soon to do things like our swimming pool, which is a very expensive investment. And we chose to do it earlier rather than later. And we know it sold a whole lot of homes. So I wish, I'm really glad I can't come up with more examples for you, but I really feel like, by the way, this is not me. This is a smart group of people gathered together, making really good decisions, and learning from others, from other mistakes that were made. Other mistakes that others have made that we learned from is that Celebration Florida, Disney's foray into this a number of years ago, they put the retail in the community, deep in the community. So you had to go, if you were from the outside, you had to drive through the community. So you didn't know it was there, and they couldn't support it. You got to put your retail right out front and let all the people around you, anybody who wants to come to your restaurants and your movie theater and et cetera, you don't keep that for just your residents. And so we put that right on the street. But there's been good learnings from other folks.
That's good. Have you had to support any, the development team had to support any of those early local businesses, perhaps through revenue rent sharing rather than just, it's $5,000 a month or whatever, to really get them in earlier than might be sustainable for them?
Yeah, if you have non-credit clients, people who are either out for the first time and really don't have that, one, you've got to probably put out a little more TI than you normally would because they're not bringing as much. They have to bring money, or they're just not bought in the same way. But so a little bit more help on the front end. I think we have engaged significantly because culture matters to us. We not only got involved in their business and making sure they had everything they need to be successful, but we also engaged in their service, their customer service, whether we wanted all of our retailers to have name tags for their people with at least their first name on it. We wanted them to greet people in a certain way. The Chick-fil-A culture is huge influence on us. And so our people say, "My pleasure." And we refresh your drink. We don't refill it. We keep things clean. We go the second mile from what was called second mile service. And so I think that was very supportive of our retailers. Percentage rent became an issue for a couple of our folks who, they were struggling. And so especially during the pandemic. And then we had a writers and an actor strike that we went through this last year where the film industry, the 4,000 people that work across the street were not in town. So, We've had one retailer that hasn't made it out of 30 in the 4 years that we've been doing that. It's pretty good, pretty remarkable. And that one was somebody who chose to do something different. So anyway, we feel like, I guess my advice would be is that you are going to have, if you're going to have either first timers or Main Street retail, you're going to have to be flexible and you're going to have to work with them, support them.
But it sounds like you really made an effort to kind of stay away from the big corporate franchises as well, because culture was important to you.
Not even a Chick-fil-A here. Now, Austin, I tell you, part of how it all and how you present things for us early on, we knew we didn't have enough rooftops to support a regional or national chain. And we knew that they would not be interested. So we just flipped the script and said they're not allowed here. And so it has turned out to be a pretty good play for us. We've really enjoyed having these owner operators in those establishments.
It makes such a difference because, once again, I have not been to Trilith, but at least Trilith feels like Trilith and not Oklahoma City or Dallas or, Nevada or whatever it is. That's one of the sad parts about the increasing corporate business kind of takeover of the United States, which is really precipitated by sprawl, is that it's really just every town looks the same, and people don't get the opportunity to express their own culture, their own identity, their own creativity. So I really love and appreciate that. Okay, one more kind of technical question. I'm curious on entitlements. How long did that take? How difficult was that process? How did the city treat it when you came to them? Had they seen something like this? I knew Serenbe is, well, it's not quite the same in terms of density, but a lot of people refer to Serenbe as one of the early ones in Georgia, at least.
Yeah, Serenbe is a great model of one that has turned out. So it's an amazing, it's taken a lot longer. It's a 25-year process. But Steve Nygren and his team over there have done a really, really good job because it is more second homes than primary residence. They've had trouble with the commercial, which is a lot of these either vacation areas or destinations are hard to support, that kind of thing. And so we have huge respect for Serenbe and what they're doing. And many of our builders have built at Serenbe. And I'm totally blanking on the question that you asked.
Entitlements and city and getting all the paperwork right. And
so we're part of the city of Fayetteville. And there are two large cities in our county, Fayetteville and Peachtree City. And Peachtree City is a planned community from the 60s that was remarkable at its time. Golf cart paths, about 100 miles of golf cart paths that connect 5 villages. A really interesting model, but not walkable. Is certainly rideable by golf cart, but not walkable. And so Fayetteville was we needed to annex into Fayetteville to get sewer. We got our water from the county. And once we were in Fayetteville, the conversation was, clearly the kind of building that we wanted to do is not even legal. Austin, you can't in most places do what we're doing. Zoning keeps you from being able to do that. And so we were able to, with a very cooperative and very progressive city council and mayor and city manager, craft a development agreement and get planned community development, PCD zoning, where we were able to write the zoning that we wanted, write the entitlements in the development agreement, and very, very, very clear about the new urbanist principles and how wide we wanted our streets to be and our alleys and the heights of our homes and all those things, many of which, again, a distance from our school to the first bar restaurant, wasn't the right distance, all those kind of things. And again, a very receptive, progressive city that supported it, that we saw early success with. Our entitlements were 750 single-family homes, a mix of townhome product and single-family, 600 multifamily, and they were directly adjacent to the single-family. So this is not in a separate area. This is directly adjacent. And 300 hotel rooms, and originally about 200,000 square feet of commercial and retail, and which they allowed us to come back and ask for more. Now it's 500,000 square feet, 500,000 square feet. And even within that, in our city, and as in most cities, you can't build a tiny home. The smallest footprint home you can build in our city and county is 1,000 square feet. But they were able to let us do that. They allowed us to do accessory dwelling units, ADUs, so you could put a guest house and you could rent it to a starving artist. So we have those, and then the tree houses, which were unique. So I would say we were blessed with again, a progressive city, a development team that was very genuine in our desire and passion about what we were doing, a chief visionary who had spent his life in the area and was known, which really, really helped. And then I think probably just got lucky a few times where we just really, we were challenged in like building separation, fire, some of the things that zoning, kind of has laid out. And we were able to work through all of those things along the way.
It sounds like a pretty positive experience overall. We're trying to get I know lots of people trying to get
Yes.
not as difficult things through and having a much harder time.
Yeah.
Because like you're saying, it's all illegal. Everything you're doing basically is illegal.
It
is.
is.
The engineering departments and the utility departments and the fire departments and the water department and the they don't like what you're doing.
And so trying to legalize that is one of the efforts. We work with a lot of groups. I'm also on the board of directors nationally for the Congress for New Urbanism, NTBA, which I had mentioned. Strong Towns is a great organization that's working to try to help in this. Urban Guild, Incremental Development, ICDev,
you're part of all
ULI.
of them.
Yeah.
What's so cool about it, I think, is, it's when you create the example, like, you and your team have done at Trilith, that's what ultimately moves the needle. Because you can talk to people about all these things, about why ADU, why all this stuff, but if people can't see it, and they've never seen anything like it, it's really, really hard because you're just playing word games. But generally, when people see it, experience it, they get it. Not everyone, but a lot.
Most do. And those who are resistant, the small percentage, will never like it. And we're okay with that too. Yeah.
So do you think, like what you guys are doing is repeatable? Do you think it's kind of picking up steam for other developers, other architects, builders that are thinking about, even something like Trilith, or even on a much smaller scale? Maybe it's a couple acres in an infill. Do you think this is a lot of the principles you're using is repeatable?
Well, interesting. There's a group called Urban 3 that does kind of analysis of the value per acre created by dense building. And the numbers are astronomical about the value per acre that's created by a 3 to 4 story town center in the traditional way, the value that street has versus a Walmart, a strip mall, anything like that. And it's a factor of 8 to 10 times just the commercial side of it. And then on the residential side, our value per acre is off the chain. And so, of course, we're putting 6 or 7 houses on an acre of land, but that the value created there. So we had them do the study. I mentioned them because it's when you see, they present it graphically. And when you see in our county, graphically where the value per acre is, and on our 235 acres in the town of Trilith, especially with charts and graphs, it's off the charts. And so there are spikes and small spikes in our 2 town centers outside of Trilith, and then a spike that's 100 times what it is around us. So my point is, there's enough value created. The question becomes the value. Who did you create the value with and for? And our people who live here have seen an increase in value that's dramatic. Our retailers are successful. It's lifting the whole area around us. Us as developers have poured most of what we've collected right back in because we could. And so it's accelerated that growth. I would say it would be hard to do it at the pace that we're doing it without and a significant influx of capital. But the results are so positive, financially and otherwise, and certainly on the human scale, that I don't know why people wouldn't. And that's our goal, is that not that we would do more of these, but that this would be a model that could be replicated.
Yeah, and speaking of that, kind of as we wrap up here, how can people learn more about the process? I mean, you've listed some great organizations, which I will put in the show notes, from CNU to NTBA to Strong Towns to Urban 3, Urban Guild. do you have any recommendations for people looking to, learn more about this? Is there a way to visit
Yes.
Trilith,
Yeah. I would say visit any walkable community that you can, and 30A in Florida, and Serenbe and Trilith here in Georgia, and Habersham. There's just a number of those that are worth going to see. I would say the Walkable City, Jeff Speck, make sure you read that. Anything on the 10-minute city, the 15-minute city, a lot of different things that are written about that type of approach. Suburban Nation, again, foundational to understand why the suburbs don't work and what we need to do to fix that. Not an easy read, but a really important foundational one. And then Trilith.com is our website if you want to come and see online. And then don't hesitate to come out, bring your walking shoes, and come to Trilith.
Are there Airbnbs or anything you can stay at? Or
interestingly, we don't allow Airbnb in our community. We do have a hotel, a remarkable hotel right in town. That's a really cool thing too, that in a walkable area that has a hotel, and it's a Marriott Autograph Collection hotel, a very nice one. You don't have to have extra bedrooms. The 4 times a year when you need somebody to stay over, they're 2 blocks away is the hotel. So yeah, great hotel.
You wouldn't believe how much I hear that, because we're building some smaller infill townhouses in this on an acre, but we're fitting like 25 townhouses and all these amazing courtyards, and they're going to be largely 2-bedroom houses just because of the demographics we're going after. And how many times people will go, but we need that 3rd bedroom. Okay, why? Because my kids come and visit at Thanksgiving and Christmas. So, it's like for 2 times a year, people, so that's a really powerful thing you're talking about there.
It's real.
Yeah. So I just got a few kind of like a quick rapid fire things. I'm curious, you've been in business a very long time, obviously fairly successful, or very successful. I said fairly successful. But I'm curious, are you a early morning guy, late worker? What's kind of your daily routine there?
Yeah, I'm a 5-hour sleep guy, 5-6 hours. And so I'm an early morning and a late night, and it's just how I'm wired. And have not been very good about that kind of balance, but I just love my work. And I can honestly say there hasn't been, I don't know, there's been a day in my life that I hadn't wanted to go to my job. I've been blessed to do some really great things and love the people that I work with. So yeah, I'd say both.
Do you have a way that you organize your days, or is it really just wake up?
No, I'm very clear. Mondays, I recast the vision and I meet with all my core teams on Monday and Tuesday. And so a series of, you got to have a regular meeting rhythm to keep things moving. I've only got 7 of us all together, 3 that do development and 4 that run the town operationally. But we probably have 1,000 people that work for us, if we're contractors in some way, shape, or form. And so it's this. So I do my meetings Monday and Tuesday. I try to create some level of separation on Wednesdays to be able to write and create and, keep things fresh that way. And work, again, probably a less meetings on a lot more freedom that Wednesday and Thursday. And then Friday, I try to be done by noon if I can. And I try to spend my weekends not fully connected to it. I'm not always successful, but I work, long, and there's other people that have that. I work that 12, 14-hour day during the week and then try to turn it off. For us, it's boating and motorcycling are our 2 passions. And then Sunday is definitely a day of rest for us. And then we restart again, going full speed on Monday.
What about business practices that you've seen work, whether it's at Trilith or, your past career? And so, I've just to give you a couple of examples of what I mean is, I recently have learned about and we're implementing or partially implementing, entrepreneurial operating system. And I know people that use Giant and really believe in that to how to cultivate people. Are there certain tools or things or ways of running businesses that you really like, or is it different for every business?
Yeah, I consulted for a few years And I realized it's some of my mentors and some of the leadership, although these leadership principles are timeless, they're a little bit aged, and, built to last. And so Jim Collins, a huge influence. John Maxwell, from a leadership standpoint, huge influence. Ken Blanchard. I would say also this idea, there's a book called The Rockefeller Habit, and a guy named Vern Harnish. And again, it's been a few years, but the idea is that the Rockefellers did life together. They lived in New York City, all within a couple blocks of each other. They walked to work, and which was how they started their day. They were one of the first ones to have lunch at their office, and so they ate their meal together, and then they walked home. And you're talking about 100 years ago, right? And so that has been translated into the Rockefeller Habits, which is an early morning stand-up meeting where you connect with your core people, connect at midday, and do it socially over lunch. Enjoy each other, and then do some type of check-in at the end of the day. So brief on either end, so you don't have to live and walk together in New York City to have it. But so I'd say Mastering the Rockefeller Habits was a real influential book for me, and something I probably still do. Every Monday, I've got lunch with my team, and that is the one time of the week that I know we're going to be at a social setting where I can find out about the families, figure out what's going on with people, but also catch up with work. So I'd say those kind of habits and rhythms that are people focused, probably even more than the execution and the checkbox.
That's great. And last question, what's a place that you've traveled that really, really inspired you?
Yeah, I would say Seaside, more than anything, was the single place where I saw the kind of, and again, it's a destination, more vacation destination, but the way it was designed, the way the built environment made you feel, and was probably the most inspirational place I've been. And I've traveled a lot around the world, and there are a lot fancier, bigger things, but it was the simplicity and the intentionality. All their materials, by the way, you can't use materials at Seaside that were designed after 1945 or so. So yeah, all original building materials, really cool architecture, et cetera. So I'd say Seaside, Florida.
Very cool. Well, Rob, Thank you very much. A lot of wonderful experience that you just shared. And I wish you the best of luck as you continue to build out Trilith. And I very much hope to visit with my family at some point.
But you are certainly welcome.
All right.
There's no, like I said, there's no gates at Trilith. Come on.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
That was awesome to talk to Rob, someone who's just been really successful actually building a town from scratch. And I can't wait to actually get out and visit Trilith. For anyone interested in learning more about what he's doing and just honestly this movement of building people-centered, walkable neighborhoods, I'll put stuff in the show notes, but just to throw out some things, he talked about visiting Seaside, Florida, or visiting Trilith itself. And if you visit Seaside, there's multiple neighborhoods, 30A and Rosemary right there that you can visit. And in Trilith, you could go visit Serenbe. I don't think that's too far as well. Also, some great books that both he and I recommend and have read are Suburban Nation, Strong Towns. There's actually a book called Strong Towns. And some of these organizations, NTBA, National Town Builders Associations, there's the Strong Towns organization movement, and they have an actual annual gathering before Congress of the New Urbanisms gathering annually each year. So some great organizations, some great ways to learn more about this stuff, get plugged in, and frankly, to get some very practical resources. Even if you're a small, if you're an architect or you're a builder and want to learn more about this stuff and you're thinking about maybe even trying something yourself, it doesn't have to be starting a whole town, right? We at Building Culture are working on a little bit over an acre right now in an infill setting, but it's the exact same principles, just at a much smaller scale. If you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you like, subscribe, and share. And on Apple and Spotify, leave us a 5-star review if we deserve it. And thanks so much for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode.